First up is 𝐃𝐀𝐌𝐄. She's a PhD candidate at the Radboud UMC and a health AI consultant. So she has a lot of experience in AI, has also looked into the different applications that are there and how they are entering the market. So really into the commercialization of it. So today she will talk about AI in medical imaging, from research to commercialization and back. So 𝐾𝐀, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the introduction and the invitation to kick this afternoon off with you all. I assume there's many researchers here, maybe potential AI users, maybe even entrepreneurs that have ideas on algorithms, on developing them or using them or applications. And in this talk, I hope to explain a bit more about what it takes to really bring your algorithms to clinical practice and create an impact with them on healthcare. And of course, that usually starts with research. So this is shows you how many publications there are currently on PubMed, or well, it's a few months ago already, to be honest, when you search for artificial intelligence. And of course, there's a lot of publications out there already and researchers developing algorithms. But of course, it's hard to, well, have a publication or a paper predict a new patient coming in, what maybe indeed, well, we talked about in the introduction about lung nodules, whether they have something like that. Well, something else needs to happen. In the Radboud UMC, they already developed a platform for medical imaging that hopes to already bridge this gap a little bit, so bring it a little bit closer to clinical practice. And this platform called Current Challenge, what you can do is upload your algorithm with a Docker container. And in this way, people can actually try it out. So they can upload an image and get the predictions of the algorithm. There's specific viewers there that you can also look at the overlays and see what comes out and download these results. So I think it's already a great way to sort of prototype your algorithms and already test it, bringing it closer to clinical practice. But to really get it into clinical practice, a bit more is usually necessary. Because this is not the best way of integrating it in your clinical workflow, I can imagine. So what usually happens is that it leaves the research environment, so in this case, maybe the UMCG, and it will be incorporated into a company. Well, it might take some time before your office will look like this, and maybe the first while, it's maybe a bit more like this. And to start off, I have a question for you to see how, well, maybe optimistic, pessimistic, or realistic you are, how long you'll be in such an office. So the question is, how long do you think it takes for a company to be founded? So we're looking more at these AI startups in radiology. So the data has been based on radiology. For the first product to get into clinical practice. And I will turn on the ball. Let's see. Clear the result. So you should see a poll right now, so you can vote. How long does it take? How long do you think? 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or more for their first product of a vendor to come into clinical practice? Okay, so I see the results coming in. I will share them as well with you. So there's 2 years, 4 years, and the majority says 6 years or more. All right, so I think in that sense you are realistic / pessimistic. So let's say close poll, because the answer is on average about 4 years. So usually there's already some research before that, before it becomes a company, but it takes an average up till now 4 years for a company to have their first product in clinical practice. So why does it take so long? I think a lot needs to happen for such a product to be used clinically. So what you see here is the technical readiness level model developed by NASA to assess the maturity of technology. So this was not necessarily developed for healthcare, but I think it applies pretty well. And I'm sorry that the figure is in Dutch. I created this with Klaske, a colleague, for a Dutch article. But what you can see is that you start at level 1, where it's really about research, developing the use case, having feasibility studies. Is it really going to be working? And creating proof of concepts. Well, there in level 3, 4, you might be able to use a platform such as Grand Challenge to also test your prototype in a sort of offline environment retrospectively. But at some point, you need other things to really bring it into practice. So that could be even the whole software around it. So the user interface, it needs to be secure. You need to have maybe more data to make it generalizable for a larger population. And at some point, I think one of the bigger barriers is that you need CE certification. So you need to comply to certain rules and regulation to get your products to be able to be used in clinic for patient care. In the United States, that's the FDA approval that you might have heard from as well. And in Europe, that is a CE mark. And in Europe, there's notified bodies that actually check if you comply to these rules. Recently, these rules have also changed, so they've become a bit more strict and a bit more difficult, which also, I think, has lifted the barrier a bit for new companies and new products to enter the market. Of course, for good reasons. I mean, there's risks to these products, and yeah, these rules haven't been developed for no reason. But it can be a bit more of a barrier to entry for new companies and new products. Of course, you need to make sure that your security is well organized. At some point, you need to do your marketing and the sales. And especially in the second phase, this all costs money. So also the CE mark, getting that and having the studies to support the evidence for that costs money. So that's also the reason why very often these products or these algorithms leave kind of the research setting and have to become a company, because you might need external investors to be able to go through this whole process. But so far, there's quite some, there are some companies that were able to go through this process and develop products. So here's another question for you. And after that, I will leave you alone. Let me check, open poll. So how many products, AI products, do you think have gone through this process for radiology? And then I'm focusing on Europe, so that can be used in Europe for the clinical fields, clinical radiology. Products that are on the market, so the votes are coming in. Oh, it's quite spread. Share results, there you go. All right, so I see a lot of 50 to 100, 100 to 200. Well, a bit of everything, but most of you have C, 50 to 100, which of course is the most statistically most probable answer with these kind of questions, right? If you have 5 options to choose the middle one. But in this case, that's not correct, because it's 100 to 200 that we know of, at least. So I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So for my PhD, what we did is we developed a website called AIradiologycom. And there you can actually find an overview of CE certified AI products for this field, so for radiology specific. And you can filter on the different specialties, modalities, and find what is out there. And currently we have more than 160 products on there of about 70 plus companies. So I think I updated the database again last week, so it's already a bit more. But here you can really see an overview of these products and companies that made it there. So I think that's already quite a lot. So where are these people from? I have to use the other pointers. So I made a little map to check where are these companies founded. And of course there's some bias, because these are all products that have the CE mark, so they can be sold in Europe. And that means that, of course, if a company is founded and based in Europe, they probably first try to also bring it to clinical practice in Europe. So here you see if, with the dots already, there's more weight on the European products. But for example, also in South Korea, there's quite a lot of vendors. In the US, there's vendors that have products for Europe. If we into Europe, the Netherlands is pretty well represented. So there's about 5, 6 startups in the Netherlands that have AI companies for radiology. And if you look at the size of our country, of course, that's similar to what we have in the UK or in France, for example. So we have good soil, so to speak, if you have the ambition to do so, to do that in this country. So what are these products like? Oh no, am I going to an external link? No, okay, so it's going fine. It was hanging a bit. All right, so what are these products doing? So here there are some figures about the subspecialty. So what area do they address, modality, and main functionality. So to illustrate it a bit, some examples. For example, for chest X-ray, to do abnormality detection, so to figure out which X-ray is normal, which is abnormal, or do triaging, there's currently 13 products on the market that do that. So we see that there is a lot of similarity sometimes, that different vendors do the same thing. And there's also areas that are not very well addressed yet, such as abdomen, as you can see also in the first subspecialty charts. Well, that actually is quite a big workforce for the radiologist. Another example is neurology, MR, for brain region, or for example, MS lesion quantification. There's already 23 products out there. Of course, they do all like a bit different things sometimes, so I kind of group them here. They are not all exactly doing the same thing. But of course, once they have an algorithm, a basis, it's easier to expand on that and bring on the, new features to the market. And last, another popular example is breast mammography for breast cancer detection. There's already 9 products out there. So if you're thinking about bringing a product to the market, maybe these are the use cases that might not be the ones that are should be your first goal, as there's already quite some competition. On the other hand, it may mature the market a bit, so it could also help you move forward quicker. So there's pros and cons to both. So here's a graph on what the market has been looking like in the past year, so how it has been growing. On the left is a graph where we see how many products are in total on the market, and on the right, the number of vendors that are providing these products. And in a first sight, I think it really looks like a fast growing market. But we do see some changes if we look a little bit closer. In the past year, we see that the growth is not as steep anymore as the year before. So the year before, a lot of new products came into market from 2000 to 2019, and now it has still grown a lot, but not as much anymore. And we see that especially if we look at the companies. So the new companies now entering the market are not as many anymore. So what we see is that most companies are now expanding their portfolios. So they have already some products on the market and maybe bring out a third or fourth or fifth use case. And most of those startups started already in 2016, 2017, and are now maturing and past these 4 years, so to speak, to bring all this AI software there. So it's maybe stagnating, maybe consolidating. We see a lot of partnering between these companies because, yeah, as you know, there isn't many, and we'll have to see how many will survive out there on the long term. But of course, to create an impact with these AI algorithms, you don't even need to bring them to the market, they need to be used. Otherwise, there's no physician or patient that can benefit from it. The past 2 years, we've done a survey among the radiology departments in the Netherlands, and we asked them what software they use in clinical practice. So not what they're researching or what they're developing, but really in daily clinical use, what is now supporting your workforce. And on the left is the number of hospital organizations, and on the right, the AI implementations in total. So here we really talk about the products and the use cases. So for the hospitals, we already see that it largely increased last year. So it was in 2020 in spring, it was only about 14 hospitals out of the 69, so almost 70 hospital organizations that we have in the Netherlands. And now it's already over 20, I think it's 24. And especially if you look at the AI implementations, as you can see, increased a lot. So it doubled and more. So we see a lot more diversity in all these applications. And first, most applications were from Dutch companies, and now they're from all over the world. But what they also mentioned is that the largest barrier there is still for bringing it to clinical practice is the business case and is the financial bit. So who's going to pay for it? And that is because the impact of these algorithms is still not very clear. And if this impact is not very clear, it's also difficult to determine how much may it cost and who is going to pay for it. And we performed a study to demonstrate that last year, where we looked at 100 of these products and discovered that only about a third, so 36 out of them, had peer-reviewed evidence of these products. So that showed how well they performed until if they had any clinical impact. But most of these studies were still really on the level of like sensitivity, specificity in a standalone environment. And very little is still known about, okay, does it make the patient really better, or does it make healthcare cheaper? So that really brings us back, I think, from the company environment, also back to the research environment, to be able to answer all of these questions. These worlds cannot live without each other. So answering products like, or questions like, which product is better? What is the impact of the product? Not only on like, hey, standalone, it's doing better than a radiologist, but that's probably not how it's being used. So how will it really work in clinical practice prospectively and impacts the patient's health and in the end also the financial aspect? So because then we can say, hey, who should pay for these AI solutions? And do these benefits really outweigh the costs? So these are a lot of questions that I think can only be answered when both the vendors, the clinical users, and researchers work together, and they all have a role in that. And I think we've already come a long way. If you look back 5 years ago or so, we were still really discussing about, well, would it even be technically feasible? So can deep learning and machine learning really do all these things? Where research, of course, played a really big role. Then we had the development of all these products, also the workforce, increased knowledge and acceptance of the role of AI is going to have in healthcare. And I think now we're really in this last phase of validation, implementation, and value generation. And here I think all these stakeholders come together to really find out what the impact is, if this is a positive one, and what we can learn from it to also improve the products that we're creating with each other. With that, I would like to end my story. And thanks for listening. And I hope there's still time for questions.
Yeah, a lot of people are applauding already. Are there any questions? You can put them in the chat if you want. Thank you, Kiki. It was a very interesting presentation. It's interesting to see how things are gradually going into the clinical application. I was surprised by the only 4 years. I was expecting it to be to be longer.
Yeah, so in healthcare in general, it takes usually 17 years for a clinical innovation to really adopt it. And in that sense, it's really quick. Well, but if you look at other industries, of course, where software and AI is being introduced, it's of course very long, because there you go with a minimum viable product and you just iterate and make it better while you're using it. And that, of course, is a bit different in healthcare.
Is it also speeding up partly because it is a lot of those are coming from scientific groups that have spent years already in the
definitely,
and then they become a company?
Yeah, definitely. So the 4 years is really from starting a company, and usually indeed there has been people doing a PhD on that subject already before that. So the technology might have been developed already for 8 years, and that's also what you see in the technical readiness level scheme. That the company comes in halfway somewhere usually, because the first bit might be better to develop in a research environment.
There's a question in the chat.
Is there any index of how many companies or products survive the 4-year mark? So does that mean 4 year after introduction or 4 year? Yeah, so after the introduction, if they survive. So I think it's too soon to say, because the investors that are in these companies, hopefully they know they're in healthcare, and it might take a while before they get their return of investment. So there's still, I think, a lot of companies that are, most of them, the majority will not be self-sustainable yet financially. So they are dependent on external funding to keep it going. What I do notice is that there's a lot of partnerships going on. So everybody has these point solutions, and they try to find each other to be able to offer a complete solution, a suite for example, for stroke. So to also, kind of catch up with the competition, because hospitals, they want solutions. They don't want to like a whole workflow solution and not just a algorithm which does one thing. So that might cause that companies will also merge or they will be acquired. But it's too soon to really see that happening yet.
Okay, thanks, Kiki. I think we should move on to the next presentation.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, my email is there. So
yeah, there are
a lot of things coming in now, but I'm not sure if I can still see them when we leave this meeting. So.
I hope that you will still be able to assess them. I'm not sure. To go to the next lecture, we will go back to the lobby again, and then you can click on the presentation of Ludo Cornelissen, who will be up next. So we stop this session and see you all at the presentation of Ludo. Thanks, Kiki.
Thanks.